I was told to record everything. That was my commission when I joined the 63rd Expedition Fleet. Paint what I saw, write what I heard. Preserve the truth of our species, reunification for generations yet unborn. You are the memory of mankind, they told us. Without you, none of this will be remembered. I believed them. Now, decades later, with trembling hands and fading sight, I understand what they truly meant. We were witnesses, and witnesses remember things that others would prefer to forget. What I recorded, what all of us recorded, became dangerous. The Iterators are gone. The lodges have fallen silent. The Crusade ended in fire. But the recordings remain. Somewhere, in a vault that no longer bears a name, these tapes survive. My voice, my testimony, the truth of what the Imperium was, before it became what it is. If you are listening to this, you have found them. I pray you understand what you hold. This is the testimony of Imagist, seconded to the 63rd Expedition Fleet, under the command of War Master Horus Lupercal. The following is my account of the Great Crusade, its glory, its contradictions, and the seeds of its destruction. Rewind if you must. Press play when ready. Vermilion level clearance confirmed. This recording has been compiled from materials recovered during routine archaeological survey of the original storage medium, a data crypt of pre-heresy manufacture, was discovered in the tertiary archives of an Administratum facility that no longer exists. The contents predate the current era by more than 10,000 standard years. What follows is a reconstruction of events that the Imperium of Man has spent 10 millennia attempting to forget. The Great Crusade, the rise of the Legiones Astartes, the Emperor in his glory, before the Golden Throne became his tomb. This is the age before treachery, before brother turned against brother, before the galaxy burned. This is what we lost. By order of the Order Hereticus, access to these materials is restricted. Unauthorized distribution carries the penalty of servitor conversion. The Emperor protects. To understand the Crusade, you must first understand what came before. The long night. 5,000 years of isolation. 5,000 years of silence between the stars. 5,000 years during which humanity, scattered across a million worlds, believed itself to be utterly alone. The official histories call it the Age of Strife. The Mechanicum calls it the Age of Darkness. On some worlds, they call it the Apocalypse. On others, they had no name for it at all. Only the knowledge that once, long ago, the sky had been full of ships, and then the ships stopped coming. Warp storms, vast, impassable tempests in the dimension we use for interstellar travel, cut the galaxy into fragments. No vessel could pass. No message could reach between the stars. Each world became an island. Each colony a universe unto itself. Some prospered. Most did not. Archival fragment. Age of Strife. Planetary fate summaries. Partial listing. Calth. Isolation during approximately 2,300 years. Population decline 94%. Survivors retreated to underground cavern networks. Developed radiation-resistant subspecies. Recontacted M30. Olympia. Isolation during approximately 4,100 years. Surface rendered uninhabitable by warfare. Population fragmented into warring city-states built into the mountainsides. Technological regression to pre-atomic levels. Recontacted M30. Nostramo. Isolation duration approximately 5,000 years. Planetary core destabilized. World exists in perpetual darkness. Society collapsed into criminal hierarchy. Average lifespan at recontact, 29 years. Recontacted M30. Subsequent note. Destroyed M31 by Primarch decree. Barbarous. Isolation duration unknown. Planet shrouded in toxic fog. Human population survived only in lowest valleys. Ruled by Xenos overlords of unknown classification. Recontacted M30. Note, these summaries represent favorable outcomes. Estimated 60% of human colonies, established during the dark age of technology, did not survive to recontact.
60%. I remember when I first heard that number. We were 3 months into the 63rd expedition, and an Iterator was giving a morale lecture to the mortal crew. He meant it to be inspiring. Look how many we have saved. Look how many we have brought back into the light. I could not stop thinking about the ones we hadn't. The Age of Strife lasted 5,000 years. 5,000 years of worlds dying alone. Children born and growing old and dying, without ever knowing that humanity still existed beyond the sky. Civilizations that had mastered the stars, reduced to scratching in the dirt. And the things that came for them.
The warp is not empty, ladies and gentlemen. This is the first truth the Imperial Truth teaches, though we phrase it carefully. There are no gods, we say. There is no supernatural. But there are entities. Predators. Things that exist in the dimension we use for travel. And they are drawn to human minds like parasites to blood. During the Age of Strife, humanity's psychic potential began to manifest in unprecedented numbers. Children, born with the ability to read thoughts, to move objects, to see the future. On a stable world with proper training, such gifts might have been managed. But there were no stable worlds. The Psychers went mad. Their powers opened doorways, and through those doorways came things that had been waiting since before humanity learned to speak. We do not name them in official records. We call them warp predators, or imperial entities, or, in older texts, demons. The word does not matter. What matters is what they did. Entire worlds consumed. Populations turned against themselves. Civilizations that had survived millennia of isolation destroyed in a single night by something that wore their neighbors' faces. This was the Age of Strife. This was what the Emperor ended.
Historical marker. Unification Wars. Terra. Circa M29-M30. Prior to unification, Terra was divided among approximately 700 distinct political entities. Techno-barbarian kingdoms, warlord fiefdoms, hive-state confederacies, religious enclaves, mutant domains. The Emperor emerged from the and commenced military operations approximately M29. Primary forces. The Thunder Warriors, gene-enhanced soldiers, precursor to Legiones Astartes, noted for extreme aggression and psychological instability. Combat effective, but unsuitable for prolonged deployment. Campaign duration, approximately 2 centuries. Casualty estimates. Conservative projections indicate 2.7 to 4.1 billion human deaths during the final century of operations. Outcome: planetary unification. All opposition eliminated or incorporated. Establishment of unified Terran government under direct Imperial rule. Addendum: Thunder Warriors were phased out following unification. Circumstances of decommissioning remain classified. No one knows where the Emperor came from. I have heard the stories, of course. We all have. that he was born in the ancient times before Terra had a single name, that he walked among us for millennia, guiding humanity from the shadows. A king here, a prophet there, a philosopher, a general, a healer of plagues. I have heard that he was once called many names, that he stood beside warriors whose legends we still tell, but we have forgotten that they were his. I do not know if any of this is true. No one does. When I saw him, when I stood in his presence, that single time, I understood that whatever he was, it was beyond my comprehension, beyond any human comprehension. He was light, not metaphorically, not symbolically. When he entered a room, your eyes ached, your soul ached. You wanted to weep and laugh and kneel and run, all at once. The Iterators told us he was not a god, that there were no gods, that superstition was the enemy of progress. But standing before him, I understood why so many could not help but worship. He was the emperor of mankind, and in those days, he had a plan.
The Emperor conquered Terra in less than 2 centuries. He wielded armies of genetically modified warriors and technologies that had not been seen since the Age of Technology. But that was only the beginning. The Emperor had always known that humanity's salvation lay beyond a single world. We had to reclaim the stars. We had to reunite the scattered colonies, rebuild what had been lost, and forge a civilization strong enough to survive the horrors of the warp. For that, he needed 2 things: ships and soldiers.
Record. Treaty of Mars. 739.M30. The Emperor of Terra established formal alliance with the Mechanicum of Mars under the terms of the treaty. 1. The Emperor was recognized as the Omnisia, avatar of the machine god. 2. The Mechanicum pledged its forges, its fleets, and its Titan legions to the Emperor's service. 3. Mars retained internal autonomy and religious independence. 4. The Emperor provided access to recovered standard template constructs and ancient technologies. Analysis. The Treaty of Mars provided the industrial capacity for galactic conquest. Without Martian forges, the Great Crusade would have been logistically impossible. Secondary analysis. The Mechanicum's recognition of the Emperor as Omnisia represented a theological compromise. The Emperor publicly rejected divinity while accepting a title that implied it. This contradiction would have significant consequences. The alliance with Mars gave him the ships. The legions gave him the warriors. I have heard many accounts of how the Space Marine legions were created. The official records speak of gene seed, genetic material harvested from the Primarchs, the Emperor's own sons, and implanted into human aspirants to transform them into something more than human. 19 organs, years of surgery and indoctrination, a mortality rate that would be considered genocide if applied to any other population. But those who survived became Astartes, Space Marines, giants in ceramite armor, faster than any unaugmented human, stronger than machines, able to survive wounds that would kill a dozen ordinary men. They knew no fear. They knew no fatigue. They knew only war, and loyalty to the Emperor who had created them. 20 legions, at their height, hundreds of thousands of warriors in each, millions of superhuman soldiers, forged for a single purpose: the reconquest of the galaxy. And the Primarchs? The Primarchs were something else entirely. 20 sons, 20 generals, 20 demigods, each crafted from the Emperor's own essence, each designed to embody a different aspect of war. They were to lead the legions, not just as commanders, but as fathers. Each legion bore the genetic imprint of its Primarch. Each Astartes was, in a sense, that Primarch's son. But the Primarchs were lost. Before they could mature, before the Emperor could raise them himself, something happened. The histories say the forces of chaos, the great enemy, the things that dwell in the warp, tore the infant Primarchs from their gestation pods and scattered them across the galaxy. The Emperor's sons fell to distant worlds like meteors. They grew alone, shaped by alien cultures, unaware of their origins or their purpose. And the Emperor, grieving but undeterred, launched the Great Crusade to find them.
This is the Pride of Terra, Expedition Fleet 773, entering the Keelakid system. We're detecting new orbital defense platforms. Augury shows primitive industrial civilization. Estimated attack level coal and steam. No evidence of warp-capable vessels. Compliance protocols engaged. Advanced elements deploying. Iterator team standing by. Emperor willing, this one will be clean.
4,287 primary expedition fleets. That was the scale of the Great Crusade at its height. 4,000 fleets, each containing dozens of vessels, each fleet carrying Astartes, Imperial army regiments, Titan maniples, Mechanicum support elements, and the countless human personnel required to wage war across the stars. 200 years of expansion, 1,000,000 worlds brought into compliance. The term is important. Compliance, not conquest. The Crusade was not an invasion. It was a reunification. Humanity was one species, scattered by tragedy. And the Emperor had come to make us whole again. When a fleet arrived in a human world, the people there were given a choice. Accept the Emperor's rule, join the Imperium, receive the benefits of civilization, warp travel, trade, protection from Xenos threats. In exchange, pay your tithes, obey Imperial law, and abandon your superstitions. Most worlds accepted. They remembered in their myths and legends that they had come from somewhere, that there had been a time before the long night, when the Imperium arrived and told them Terra was real, that the Emperor had come to bring them home. Most wept with joy. Those that did not, the Crusade was not gentle. It couldn't afford to be. There were Xenos empires that had enslaved human populations for millennia. There were warp-tainted civilizations that had to be purged to the last soul. There were human worlds so corrupted by isolation that compliance was impossible. The Astartes did what was required. That is why they were made.
I want to tell you about Viridian 9. It was early in my service, with the 63rd Expedition. Only my second compliance action. I was still naive then. Still believed that what we were doing was simple, good, uncomplicated. Viridian 9 had been cut off since the Age of Strife. 4,000 years of isolation. When the storms took them, they had been a thriving colony of 60 million. Miners mostly, extracting rare minerals from the planet's crust. When we arrived, there were fewer than 800,000 left. They had been found by the Crave, a Xenos species, psychic parasites, mind eaters, things that did not kill you but hollowed you out. They fed on thoughts, on souls, on the very spark that made you, you. And the worst part, you couldn't tell. A Crave could wear your neighbor's face, speak with your daughter's voice, and you would never know until the moment they decided to take you too. For 4 millennia, the people of Viridian 9 had lived in thrall. Not terror, thrall. The Crave did not rule through fear. They ruled through control. Entire generations born into bondage their minds never entirely their own. The survivors, the free ones, had retreated underground. They developed rituals, challenge questions, memory tests, secret codes changed daily. Anything to prove the person standing before you was still them. They had survived, barely, generation after generation, losing a little more each century, fighting an enemy that could be anyone. That might be your husband, your oldest friend, your own child returned wrong from a night walk. And then we came.
Expedition Fleet 6-3, this is Forward Element. We've made contact with the local population. They're asking if we are real. Repeat, they are asking if Terra is real. Requesting Iterator support. These people have been waiting a very long time.
The compliance action took 11 days. Not because people resisted. They didn't. They couldn't believe their fortune. They thought we were legends, myths, dreams their grandparents had told them to keep hope alive. 11 days because the Crave root mines were dug deep, and the Lunar Wolves do not leave a job unfinished. I was there when Captain Loken led the final assault on the Xeno's nest. I was there when they burned the root mine's lair clean, and I saw the bodies of the dominated stagger and fall as the psychic hold was severed. Some of them woke up. Some of them have been puppets for so long they simply stopped. And I was there afterward, when the people of Iridian 9 came up from their bunkers and saw the sky for the first time in generations. There was a woman. I photographed her. It became one of my most reproduced images, though I doubt anyone remembers now. She was old, her face carved by decades of fear and loss, and she was holding a book. A children's book, ancient, falling apart, passed down through the family since before the long night. It was a picture book about Terra, about blue oceans and green forests and a golden palace where a great king lived. She had read it to her children, and they had read it to theirs. 4,000 years of mothers telling their daughters, somewhere out there, Terra is waiting. Someday they will come for us. And we came. Loken knelt before her. This giant, this warrior who had just burned a Xenos hive to ash, knelt in the dirt before an old woman and said, "We're sorry it took so long." That was what the Crusade was supposed to be. That was what we believed we were doing. Finding the lost, freeing the enslaved, bringing humanity home after the longest night in history. Iridian 9, 6319, Sarosh, Davin, 100 worlds, 1,000 worlds, where human beings wept with joy because Terra had not forgotten them. I think about that woman often. I think about the book she carried, and the faith that had sustained her family for 4 millennia. I think about what it meant to her, to have that faith rewarded. And I think about what we asked of others. The worlds where faith was not rewarded but punished. The civilizations we did not save, but broke. The priests we made kneel in the ashes of their temples. Was it the same thing? Was Iridian 9 and Ardum Tertius part of the same truth? Or were they opposites? Salvation and murder, wearing the same uniform. I don't know. I have never known. I only know that I was there for both.
World, Ardum Tertius. Local designation, the Covenant of the Ascending Light. Pre-compliance population, 214 million. Civilization type, theocratic monarchy.
Unified planetary government centered on worship of solar deity. Advanced industrial capacity. No warp-capable technology. Initial contact. Iterator delegation received by planetary hierarch. Imperial Truth presented. Hierarch expressed willingness to discuss terms. Day 7. Public referendum held. Population voted 94% in favor of accepting Imperial rule. Conditional on preservation of religious practices. Day 8. Conditional compliance rejected by Expedition Command. Imperial Truth is non-negotiable. Hierarch given 24 hours to recant publicly and order dissolution of priesthood. Day 9. Hierarch broadcasts planetary address. Announces acceptance of Imperial rule. Renounces divinity of solar deity. Orders temples closed. Weeps during transmission. Day 12. Compliance confirmed. Iterator teams deployed for population reconditioning. Post-compliance population 214 million. Tithing grade Exactis Secundus. Addendum filed 30 years post-compliance. Hierarch died by his own hand. Year 6 of Imperial governance. Funeral attended by 17 people. No investigation requested.
I was there on Ardem Tertius. I watched the hierarch give his address. I photographed his face as he told his people that everything they had believed for generations was a lie, that the sun they had worshipped was merely a star, that the ascending light was a myth, and the only truth was the Imperial Truth. He was an old man. He had led his people through famines and plagues. He had held them together through the long night, when they had no way of knowing if anyone else in the universe still lived. And we made him stand before them and call himself a fool. After the address, I spoke to one of the Iterator captains. I asked him if it had been necessary. The world had accepted compliance. The people were willing. Could we not have accommodated, found some way to let them keep their faith, even if only in private? He looked at me as if I had suggested we breathe vacuum. Faith is not a private matter, he said. Faith is a contagion. You cannot contain it. You can only cure it, or watch it spread. I did not argue. I photographed. I recorded. I did my duty. But I remember a child in the crowd during the hierarch's address. A little girl, maybe 7 years old. She was crying, not because she understood what was happening, but because everyone around her was crying. And she looked up at the view screen, at the old man weeping as he renounced his gods. And she asked her mother, "Why is he so sad?" Her mother didn't answer. I don't know if anyone ever did. I have thought about that child often in the years since. I wonder if she grew up grateful. Grateful that the Imperium freed her from superstition before it could take root. I wonder if she became an Iterator herself, teaching others the truths we taught her. Or I wonder if she remembered, if somewhere in the quiet hours she still thought about the old man on the screen and the faith he was forced to betray. I wonder if she ever forgave us. I don't know if the Emperor was right. That is a terrible thing to admit. After everything I witnessed, after everything I recorded, I still do not know if what we did was salvation or murder. If we rescued humanity or merely conquered it. Perhaps it was both. Perhaps that is the only honest answer.
You ask me about the Crusade. What will you have me say? That it was glorious? It was. I have seen worlds liberated from Xenos slavery. I have seen human populations weeping with joy as our Thunderhawks descended. I have been embraced by children whose grandparents remembered the long night, who had been told all their lives that Terra was a myth. And then we came, and proved the myths were true. But do you want to hear about the other side? The burnings, the purges, the worlds that resisted. I will not apologize for what we did. A species scattered across 1,000,000 worlds will not survive. A species divided by 1,000 religions, 1,000 cultures, 1,000 petty grievances will not survive. Unity was not optional. It was necessary. The Emperor understood this. The Primarchs understood this. We, his sons, understood this. When a world refused compliance, it was not because they loved freedom. It was because they loved their own power more than they loved their species. They chose pride over survival. They chose death. We gave them what they chose. And in the midst of all this, the conquests, the compliance actions, the building of an interstellar empire, the Primarchs were found. One by one across 2 centuries, the Emperor's scattered sons were recovered from the worlds where they had fallen. Each had grown to adulthood. Each had become a legend on their homeworld. Each was reunited with a father they had never known. 20 Primarchs, 20 sons. I could speak for days about each of them. Their deeds fill libraries. Their names are written in the stars. But for the purposes of this lecture, I will focus on those whose fate would shape the heresy to come.
I saw Horus only a handful of times. Most often at triumphs and formal occasions, surrounded by his sons, bathed in the adulation of thousands. From a distance, he was what the propaganda promised. Radiant, commanding, the perfect warrior king. But once, I saw him alone. It was on the Vengeful Spirit, late in the 3rd watch. I was returning to the Remembrance quarters after a long session editing picked captures. I should not have been in that corridor at all. I had taken a wrong turn, and I stumbled upon him standing at a viewport, looking out at the stars. He did not see me, or if he did not acknowledge my presence. He looked tired. Not physically. I do not think Primarchs experience fatigue the way we do, but something in his posture spoke of weight, of burden. His shoulders, which I had seen bear the crash of orc warlords without flinching, seemed to sag beneath something invisible. And then a mortal officer approached him. Some minor functionary with a data slate, stammering apologies for the interruption. He had made an error in the supply manifest. A trivial thing. The kind of mistake that happens 1,000 times a day, across 1,000 ships. Horus turned to him, and his face transformed. The weariness vanished. The golden warmth I had seen at triumphs blazed forth, and he smiled. And he put his hand on the officer's shoulder, and he told him it was nothing. That mistakes were how we learned. That he was grateful for the man's diligence in catching it. The officer nearly wept with relief. He left practically floating. And Horus, I watched his face as the man walked away. The smile faded. Not into anger, not into contempt. Just faded, like a fire banked for the night. He needed it, I realized. He needed to be loved. Not in the way a man needs air or food, but in the way a man needs purpose. Every interaction was an opportunity to inspire, to encourage, to bind another soul to him with kindness. It was beautiful. It was also, I think, exhausting. And perhaps, though I did not understand this until much later, perhaps it was a kind of hunger. The kind that could never truly be filled.
Primarch designation 16. Name Horus Lupercal. Legion Luna Wolves, later Sons of Horus. Homeworld of recovery Chthoniya. Chthoniya was a mining world, one of the oldest in Sol system, hollowed out over millennia by human industry. By the time Horus arrived, it had degenerated into a lawless underworld, ruled by gangs and warlords. He was raised among killers, and became the greatest killer of them all, until the Emperor found him. He was the first Primarch recovered. For 30 years he fought beside the Emperor as the only son. He learned directly from the master of mankind. He absorbed not just tactical genius, but the Emperor's vision for humanity. When the other Primarchs were found, Horus became their de facto leader. He mediated disputes, he counseled his brothers. He was the binding force that held 20 fractious demigods together. After the Ullanor triumph, the Emperor named him War Master, Supreme Commander of the entire Great Crusade. It was the greatest honor ever bestowed upon a living being.
And then there was Sanguinius, the angel. I never met him. Few outside the Blood Angels Legion ever did. But I've spoken to those who saw him, and they all say the same thing. He was the most beautiful being they'd ever encountered. He had wings, actual functional wings, vast white pinions that carried him through the air like something out of ancient myth. His face was perfect in a way that hurt to look upon. His voice was music. His presence was peace. The Emperor loved all his sons, but there were whispers never spoken aloud, but always present, that he loved Sanguinius best, that the angel was what the Emperor had hoped all the Primarchs would be, that of all of his sons, only Sanguinius had emerged from the scattering truly unscarred. The Blood Angels adored him with a fervor that bordered on worship. He led them with gentleness and wisdom. He fought with a fury that belied his angelic appearance, for beneath that beautiful exterior was a warrior without peer. And he had visions. Sanguinius could see the future. Fragments of it, at least. Glimpses of what was to come. He knew how he would die. He had always known. He went to his death willingly, because he had seen that it was necessary. But that comes later.
Subject: Rogel Dorn, Primarch of the 7th Legion. Psychological profile: stoic, uncompromising, incapable of deception or flattery. Dorn fell to the ice world of Inuit, where he was raised by the ruling caste of a vast generation ship called the Phalanx. He became their leader through sheer competence, not charisma, not manipulation, but the simple fact that everything he built worked, and everything he planned succeeded. His legion, the Imperial Fists, became the architects of the Crusade. They fortified worlds. They built defenses that stood for millennia. They transformed the Imperial Palace on Terra into the greatest fortress in human history. Dorn did not inspire love the way Horus did. He did not ask for it. He asked only for duty, and he gave duty in return. His word was unbreakable. His honesty was absolute, sometimes painfully so. Assessment: of all the Primarchs, Dorn may have been the most reliable. He had no hidden depths, no secret doubts, no capacity for treachery. What you saw was what he was. This made him invaluable. It also made him vulnerable to brothers who were not so simple. Subject: Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the 10th Legion. Psychological profile: driven, perfectionist, obsessed with strength. Ferrus fell to Medusa,
a world of perpetual geological upheaval. He survived by making himself harder than the world that tried to kill him. His hands, coated in living metal from a legendary encounter with a creature called the Astartes, became the symbol of his legion. The Iron Hands, under his command, pursued strength above all else. They replaced their flesh with augmetics, believing that metal was superior to meat. They saw weakness as sin and mercy as inefficiency. Ferrus was Fulgrim's closest friend among the Primarchs. They had forged weapons for each other. Ferrus made Fulgrim a blade called Fireblade, and Fulgrim made Ferrus a hammer called Forgebreaker. They swore oaths of brotherhood. Assessment. Ferrus Manus would be the first loyalist Primarch to die. He was killed by Fulgrim, the brother he loved most, at the drop site massacre on Istvan V. The weapon that killed him was Fireblade, the blade he had forged as a gift.
I should speak of the others. There were 20, after all. Or 18, if you believe the rumors about the two whose names have been erased from every record. Vulcan of the Salamanders, who believed that civilians should be protected, even in the midst of conquest. His legion was slower than the others, more careful, more humane. They were mocked for it by some. They did not care. Jagatai Khan of the White Scars, who fought like the wind and answered to no one's schedule but his own. He kept his own counsel, even from the Emperor, and his legion vanished for years at a time into the void, pursuing wars no one else knew about. Robert Gilliman of the Ultramarines, who built an empire within the Imperium, 500 worlds of Ultramar, governed so efficiently that they became the template for what the Crusade was supposed to achieve. He wrote the Codex Astartes, the tome that would govern Space Marine organization for 10,000 years. And there were others, 18 sons, each a legend, each a tragedy waiting to happen. But for now I must speak of two more, the ones whose fall would doom us all.
Subject: Lorga Aurelian, Primarch of the 17th Legion. Psychological profile: devout, charismatic, obsessive, prone to absolutist thinking. Lorga fell to the world of Kolkis, a planet ruled by a religious covenant. He was raised by priests, trained in the mysteries of their faith, and eventually became the High Priest himself. When he discovered that their prophecy spoke of a god who would one day come from the sky, he believed. And when the Emperor arrived, Lorga knew he had found his god. The Word-Bearers, under Lorga's command, approached the Crusade differently than any other legion. They did not simply conquer worlds, they converted them. Temples were erected to the Emperor, prayers were written in his name. Entire populations were baptized into the worship of the Master of Mankind. The Emperor disapproved. The Imperial Truth held that there were no gods. The Emperor himself insisted he was not divine, merely the most powerful human who had ever lived. Lorga's worship was not just embarrassing, it was heresy. The Word-Bearers' Crusade record was slower than any other legions. They spent too much time building cathedrals, not enough time conquering. The Emperor's patience eventually ran out. Assessment: Lorga's humiliation at Monarchia was the first seed of the heresy. A son who loved too much, rejected by the father he worshipped. The repercussions would be catastrophic.
You want me to speak of Angron, the broken, the slave, the Primarch who should have been left to die. He fell to Nuceria, a world of slavers, where he was forced to fight in their gladiatorial pits. They implanted devices in his brain called the Butcher's Nails, neural implants that stimulated rage and aggression. It made him need violence the way others need food or water. When the Emperor found him, he was leading a slave rebellion. His army of gladiators were surrounded, outnumbered, facing certain death, but they were going to die free. The Emperor could have saved them, His fleet was in orbit. He could have extracted Angron and his followers both. Instead, he only took Angron. He teleported his son away, while the gladiators died screaming below. He told Angron that the slaves were irrelevant, that only the Primarch mattered. Angron never forgave him. The nails could not be removed without killing him. They were too deeply embedded. So Angron lived his entire life in a state of constant, escalating rage, a fury that could only be sated by slaughter. His legion, the World Eaters, adopted the nails as well. They became berserkers, butchers, the most savage warriors in the Crusade. They conquered worlds through sheer brutality. They left nothing alive. When the heresy came, Angron did not turn to chaos. He didn't have to. He had always hated the Emperor. He had always hated everyone. The only surprise was that it took so long.
Magnus. I must speak of Magnus. Magnus the Red was different from his brothers. Where they were warriors first, he was a scholar, a sorcerer, a seeker of forbidden knowledge. His legion, the Thousand Sons, were all Psyker Space Marines, who could wield the powers of the warp as weapons. The Emperor had forbidden the use of such powers. At the Council of Nicaea, he had ruled that sorcery was too dangerous, that the warp was a realm of predators, and those who drew upon its energies risked becoming prey. The Librarius programs were disbanded. The psychic arts were outlawed. Magnus disagreed. He believed that psychic power was humanity's birthright, that with proper training, it could be mastered without risk. He continued his studies in secret, delving deeper into the warp than any human had ever gone before. He thought he was wise enough to avoid corruption. He was wrong. When the heresy began, when Horus turned, Magnus tried to warn the Emperor. He used his powers to send a message across the galaxy, a desperate psychic warning that his father was in danger. But the message was too powerful. It breached the defenses of a project Magnus knew nothing about. It destroyed everything.
All channels, all frequencies. This is a priority announcement from High Command. The Ullanor Crusade is concluded. I repeat, the Ullanor Crusade is concluded. The Orc Empire is destroyed. The War Master has achieved total victory. By order of the Emperor, a triumph will be held on Ullanor Prime. All available assets are to make for the rendezvous point. Full ceremonial protocols are in effect. The Emperor himself will be in attendance. This is the greatest victory in the history of the Great Crusade. Rejoice.
Ullanor. It was the largest orc empire we had ever encountered. A civilization of greenskins that stretched across hundreds of worlds. They had been raiding the Imperium's borders for years, and their warlord, a monster called Uruk, had welded them into something terrifying. The crusade against them lasted for years. Dozens of legions participated. Millions of Imperial army soldiers died. The final assault alone cost more lives than most planetary conquests. But in the end, Horus led the final charge. He killed Uruk in single combat, driving his talon through the creature's skull, while his sons roared his name. The Emperor came to Ullanor to honor his victory. I was there, in the crowd, a junior Iterator barely worth noting. But I saw it. The Emperor descending from the sky, golden light streaming from his armor, Horus kneeling before him. The words spoken, the title bestowed. War Master, Supreme Commander of all Imperial forces, authority second only to the Emperor himself. The crowd erupted, millions of voices, humans and Astartes screaming Horus's name. It was the greatest moment in the history of the Crusade. And then, the Emperor told us he was leaving.
I remember the silence that fell. when the announcement was made. The Emperor was returning to Terra. He would not lead the crusade any longer. He had a project, a secret project, one he could not discuss, and it required his full attention. Horus was named War Master. He would finish the crusade in the Emperor's name. It was an honor beyond measure. It was also an abandonment. I watched the Primarchs' faces as the Emperor spoke. They were too far away for me to read clearly, but I could see enough. Confusion, hurt, in some cases anger, poorly concealed. Why? That was the question no one dared ask aloud. Why now, when we were so close to victory? Why retreat to Terra when the Crusade still needed him? What could possibly be more important than finishing what he had started? The Emperor did not explain. He simply left. And in his absence, questions began to fester.
Administrative notation. Establishment of the Council of Terra, 001.M31. With the Emperor's withdrawal from active command, administrative authority was delegated to a council of mortal advisors. Positions included the Sigillite, Malcador, the Master of the Administratum, the Fabricator General of Mars, and various senior bureaucratic officials. Note, this represented a significant shift in governance. For the first time, mortals held authority that had previously been reserved for the Primarchs and their legions. Bureaucrats now issued orders to demigods. Several Primarchs expressed dissatisfaction with this arrangement. Dissatisfaction was logged and filed.
What was the Emperor building? None of us knew then. Not the Primarchs, not the High Lords, not even Malcador the Sigillite, who knew more than any mortal alive. We learned later. The Webway Project. A network of tunnels through the warp, free from its dangers, connecting Terra to the galaxy without the need for conventional warp travel. A way to free humanity from the predators of the Imperium forever. It would have been salvation, but the Emperor never explained. He never told his sons why he was leaving, what he was building, or why it mattered more than they did. And in the silence, darker voices found room to whisper. What happens to warriors when the war is over? That was the question the lodges began to ask. Secret societies, spreading through the legions. The warrior lodges, they were called. Places where Astartes could speak freely, away from the hierarchy of command. They had existed for decades, tolerated as harmless fraternities. But now, new ideas took root. What if the Emperor planned to discard them? What if the legions were merely weapons to him? Tools to be destroyed when their purpose was served? What if the Great Crusade ended and the Primarchs found themselves obsolete? The lodges asked these questions, and someone was listening. I have told you what the Imperium was. 1 million worlds, 20 legions, 4,000 fleets, conquering in the Emperor's name. A golden age of expansion, of reunification, of a species coming together after 5,000 years of darkness. We believed it was only the beginning. The crusade would continue, we told ourselves. The Emperor would return when his work was done. The Primarchs would lead us to final victory. And the Imperium, this thing we had built together, this stream of unity, would last until the stars themselves grew cold. We believed that. I believed that. Standing on the observation deck with the vengeful spirit, watching the fleet prepare for its next campaign, I remember thinking, my children's children will live in a galaxy at peace. They will never know the long night. They will never fear the dark between stars. We have built something eternal. The next recording begins on a world called Monarchia. A world that no longer exists. Its coordinates struck from every map. Its name forbidden in 1,000 languages. It is the story of a son who loved too much. A father who would not be worshipped. And a humiliation that would set the galaxy on fire. We did not know it then, but the heresy had already begun.
This concludes recording 1, the Heresy Tapes. Classification remains Vermilion. The Emperor protects.